Hello! Since it's coming up to Easter, I thought I would do this paint by numbers because it's the Last Supper by Da Vinci and I thought that would be most appropriate. And I have exactly 1 week to paint this and finish filming and editing. Let's just take a quick look at the back of the picture. Yeah, that looks pretty complicated, so I better get this open and we'll see what's inside. Okay, it looks pretty basic in there, but we have a paint palette. I actually quite like that because they are all sitting in with their numbers and there's even a tiny brush. And we also have the canvas. I can do that in a week, easy I reckon. She says as she looks at the tiny numbers, and I don't know if you can see this, but see how there's quite a lot where the numbers are pointing to it? So the trick is to not paint over that number until you've painted that part. Yes, that's going to take a little bit of time, I think, to do. This is a Reeves kit. There are 20 colours, and that's about all I can see on here. So I'm going to set this up onto my easel. I find it easier to paint on an angle, so I think what I'll probably do is zoom in on parts of it and then end up zooming out. It's just more because my head is going to get in the way when I'm sitting down painting. So let's get into it. I've sped this up really quickly because this took me a long time to do. I think 3 long days of dedicated painting with a few breaks. So the ceiling was actually quite fun, although it was a bit fiddly, and I really liked the geometric pattern that it created, and I thought that the paint by numbers did well at showing a bit of perspective here, so that was a really good positive in its favour. You could just see how it looks like it's 3D, and I thought that was really cool. I had originally planned to start at the top and just work my way down, but I found that it ended up being easier doing different sections at a time, mainly because I wanted to leave one part to dry and then I'd work somewhere else. So I thought I'd work from top and bottom, doing the ceiling and the floor first. These were also the larger areas and the fastest bits to paint in, although I did find it still quite tricky because there were a lot of straight lines and it is very hard to paint with a straight line, I find, so I had a few wobbly bits, but it kind of doesn't matter, I don't think. You could see me trying very hard to keep that ceiling looking as geometric as possible, and I did make a few mistakes, but that's part of it being a painting rather than a precise technical drawing. The other challenge I had with this was to make sure I painted in the numbers that were pointing to areas before I painted over them, as I knew I was completely going to forget what numbers they were later on, so I did have to chop and change a little bit, and the back wall was particularly notorious for having numbers pointing to other areas, so I had to do all those other tiny little areas first before finishing that wall. But you could see this is a fairly large space. This is probably the quickest part of the whole painting, and I got this done relatively fast compared with the rest of the painting, which took ages. The paints themselves were actually pretty good. Most of them were opaque, which is what you want in a paint by numbers set because then they easily cover the numbers. A couple of the browns were a bit transparent, and you could see the one that painted the little squares. It went a bit patchy and I didn't like that one so much, but the majority of them were pretty good and I had no issues with that. Some paint by numbers give you really cruddy paints, but this one had, you know, a pretty decent quality one, so I was pleased with that. I think I ended up paying only about $7 for this kit. It was on sale, so that was worth the money. Oh my goodness, this part was so fiddly. It took ages, and the pattern was very precise, but I got a bit sloppy with my painting, so it's a bit abstract in the end, but you kind of still get the idea. So a bit about the original painting. The Last Supper was painted by Leonardo da Vinci in around 1495. and it's actually a giant mural painted on a wall at the convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan, Italy. And I hope I pronounced that correctly. It measures in at 700 centimetres by 880 centimetres, or 280 inches by 350 inches. And the painting represents the scene of the Last Supper of Jesus with his apostles, as it is told in the Gospel of John. The scene depicts the consternation that occurred among the 12 apostles when Jesus announced that one of them would betray him, and we all know who that was. Thanks for nothing, Judas. So I pulled this information off Wikipedia, and hopefully it is correct. I'm pretty sure it would be. This is a very famous painting, and it is definitely one that I would love to see in the flesh if I ever get back to Milan, Italy. I've only ever driven through there, we didn't get to stop, and I'm really wishing we did because I would have loved to have seen this. I don't think the original painting is actually very well kept, and they have tried to restore it a few times, but I don't think they did a very good job with it, so it's pretty faded from all accounts. But I think it would be fascinating to see, and let me know in the comments if you have actually seen this painting. I would be so interested to know what you thought about it, and if it is actually worth going to see it. I think it would be just for the sheer history of it. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci was around, 500 years ago? So just that amazes me, that something has lasted this long. I guess they weren't worrying about light fastness in those days, eh? They basically used whatever colours and pigments they could get. I imagine that Da Vinci made his own paints, and so in those days things were nowhere near the stringent quality of what paints are made these days. So I think, we worry about light fastness, but honestly, most modern day pigments are going to last so much longer than anything that existed 500 years ago. So I think I did actually find it easier to work my way into the centre of the painting, and I thought that painting the figures at the end would be more interesting than having to paint the floor, so here I go in with these guys. Now, their faces were not very good, the eyes are only hinted at, and they do look a little creepy on some of them. It works a lot better when you stand back from the painting, but close up the figures do kind of merge into one another, and the paint by numbers did limit the detail on their faces quite a lot, and I noticed this as I was going along. There seems to be a lot of bread and potatoes on that table, and the colours in this are actually really limited. You can see there's a lot of the same blues and greens, but not much in the way of red or anything like that. All of the reds were very earthy, and I guess that's just because of the limitation of pigments that were around in those days, so this paint by numbers seems to have tried to replicate that as much as possible. I've painted Jesus's eyes, but I didn't actually paint him for quite a while later. I decided to leave him for last, and that kind of looks really creepy, so we'll just go over here and paint these other apostles on this side, and then I'll work my way into the middle. Felt only right to paint Jesus last. I mean, he is the main figure in this painting, and it's all about him just before his crucifixion. So there we have it. And here we go, an absolute masterpiece. Or something like that. Good from far, but far from good. This was fun to do, but yeah, I mean, it's a pretty average result. I don't think Da Vinci would be too happy about that. What say you? The background's actually okay. I think the ceiling is probably the best part of it, but the figures are pretty average, and like their faces just kind of disappear. It's not so bad looking, you know, away from it, but when you get up close you can just see that it's not particularly great. But anyway, I'm done. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and click that subscribe button, and I will see you all again in my next video. I hope you're all having a great day. Swatch you later. Bye!